I use an XLR. I've got microphone, big XLR cables connected to it, and then it goes into what's called an interface. You can get the Rodecaster, you can get the Scarlett, you can get XLRs, you can get all the stuff if you go to growyourshow.com/PDF.
Most hosts never achieve the results they hoped for. They're falling short on listenership and monetization, meaning their message isn't being heard and their show ends up costing them money. This podcast was created to help you grow your listenership and make money while you're at it. Get ready to take notes. Here's your host, Adam Adams.
Hey, podcaster, it's your host, Adam Adams, host and coach, Adam Adams. And we're talking on this episode, which is better between XLR and USB. You've probably seen that some people are using microphones with connected to their computer that is like a USB cable, and others that are using that big round, that thicker one that is generally used by professional audio technicians and singers and song artists. The XLR. The XLR's got those 3 little holes in there, and then you're going to plug it into your microphone. And then how do you fit that into your computer? Well, my client asked me today, she was using a USB and the USB was messing up. The USB port was having some issue where if she moved around her microphone, then it'd be a little disconnection. So basically it would stop working through her microphone, and her system on her computer automatically switched the microphone to a different system, like making it so that she was now using a terrible microphone. And so she said, should I switch to XLR? And I said, yeah, you probably could. And she was asking, like, what is the only reason I'm switching to XLR? Is it because this USB is funky, or is there other value that I get with an XLR cable? And here's what I shared with her. And it was interesting because I had never thought about it this way. I asked her, I said, Mim, do you know how to drive a manual transmission? She's about my age, and people our age, generally speaking, we learned how to drive a stick shift. Anyone younger than me probably doesn't know. Like, we probably just used what's called an automatic transmission. And think of this is a vehicle, and the XLR and the USB are very similar to what vehicles are. There are pros and cons to XLR, and there are pros and cons to USB. And I think of it like when you learn how to use a manual transmission car, if you put that thing into third gear, it's definitely going to be in third gear, unless the car is literally broken. If you put it in third gear, it's in third gear. If you put it in fourth gear, it's in fourth gear. If you got it in reverse, it's in reverse. It will always work the way that it should work because it's manual. You are the one using the stick shift, putting it into gear and everything. You've got that third pedal, and it can be a little overwhelming. Think about yourself, like think about a manual transmission. If you've done squats, if you were doing squats the day before and you got really sore legs, how hard is it to push a clutch in with your left leg? It's pretty tough. And if you want to avoid that, you can just go with an automatic. Automatics are cool because they're already set up. They'll go in whatever gear that they think that they need to be in. And sometimes that's the right gear and sometimes it's the wrong gear. I'll drive an automatic and I'll be like, why did you switch gears right there? Are you kidding me? Why did you do that? I've got a Jeep. It's an automatic, and the turbo has a mind of its own. So it's got a 4-cylinder turbo, and the turbo has a mind of its own, meaning that I put on the gas. It takes like 2 or 3 or 4 seconds for the turbo to get the energy that it needs for the full force. Sometimes I'll put on the gas, and when I want to let go of the gas is when the turbo kicks in. And so I want to slow down, but my car automatically is thrusting me even more forward because of just the timing thing. And it can get really frustrating. It can get frustrating that it's not in the gear that I want. It can get frustrating that the turbo has a mind of its own. This is the same type of thing that can happen with XLR or USB. For the most part, if you use a USB mic, you're going to have at the back of your microphone this tiny little USB cord. And that USB, whether it's a micro USB or USB-C, it's going to go into your computer with either USB or a USB-C or a micro USB. Either way, you're connecting your microphone into your laptop or your desktop, whether it's an Apple or Mac or the other one. And you're going to be able to connect through there. And when using USB, that means that the computer has to use its own brain. The computer, for the most part, has to decide how loud to go or how quiet to go. The computer has to know how much gain to put into that microphone. And sometimes it's not the same amount of gain that you want. And when we switch from a USB, which is kind of like an automatic vehicle, when we switch to an XLR, there's pros and cons. With the XLR, you have the control. If you set your gain at X level, it's always going to be there. It doesn't change. If you lower your gain, it's going to lower. If you increase the gain, it's going to increase. When you put on the gas, it's changing gears. Anything you do with XLR, you have all the controls. Why would it be a bad thing? FYI, I use XLR. Just like I kind of would rather have a manual transmission car. I would rather be the mind that chooses what happens with the vehicle than leave it up to chance, leave it up to a computer program. Same thing with my XLR. I want to be in control. I want to be able to adjust it. So you have to learn a tiny bit more when it comes to cars. At first, it can be hard to figure out how to use that clutch. How much do I put the clutch down? When do I switch the gear? How many RPMs do I need that car to be at when I can go from first to second or second to third gear? How slow do I have to go when I can get it into reverse? Should I start in third gear or first gear or whatever? There's all these things that you never have to think about if you're using an automatic. It's like, okay, you've got the accelerator and you've got the brake. You've got the gas and the brake and a steering wheel. And it makes it simple, but it does have a mind of its own. So going back to XLR, do you want to have to adjust it? No. If you're a terrible driver, you definitely don't want to add in another pedal and another thing for your hand to do. It's like you go from playing on one drum to playing the whole drum set when you go to XLR. But if you know what you're doing on a drum set and you know what all of the different drums do and you have the coordination to play the bass pedal, the hi-hat with your left foot, the bass with your right foot, and the snare drum with your left hand, and the toms and everything else, the cymbals. If you understand that and you have some practice in it, then going with the whole drum set is going to give you more control than having something else. When you're looking at vehicles, you're going to have perfect control. You can down gear as you're going down the hill. You can slow down by using your gears, and you don't have to waste your brake. There's a lot of availability and options that you have when you go with a manual transmission that the automatics just won't do. And so for me, I use an XLR. I've got my microphone, big XLR cables connected to it, and then it goes into what's called an interface. The interface or the mixer, the soundboard, I personally use a Rodecaster. They're kind of expensive. I don't recommend them necessarily. I love it, but I don't think that you need it. I recommended to Mim, my client today, when I was on the phone with her, I recommended that she use the Scarlett. You can get the Rodecaster, you can get the Scarlett, you can get XLRs, you can get all the stuff. If you go to growyourshow.com/PDF, you'll be able to download an entire PDF of just equipment that my team has been able to vet. And you can go there and get the Scarlett. So I showed her this website. I showed her how to go switch to XLR. I told her, you're going to have to control this now. You're going to have to move your gain up or down, or turn that volume up or down. You're going to have to do a couple things like that, but you know that it's not going to have a mind of its own. And for her, she was sold. For her, she was like, yeah, I feel like I can get that coordination for the drums. I feel like I can get that coordination for driving a car. I feel like I can get that coordination for my computer and microphone to switch to this XLR from the USB so that I stop having these issues when the computer has a mind of its own. And it's going to give me more control. What's another drawback, though, of having an XLR? There is no way that I understand, there is no way that I know that can take the microphone directly to your computer with XLR. You usually have to have an interface. You have to have a middle ground. You have to have a place where the mic goes to, like my Rodecaster or the Scarlett that I mentioned to her by Focusrite. You usually have to have it go into this soundboard, and then it can go to your computer. And what does that mean? It means you have to spend more money. So we looked at the Scarlett, and as of today, she could get that on Amazon with my link, growyourshow.com/PDF. She could get that on Amazon for like $170, $169. And she would have to pay an extra $10 for the actual XLR cable. That's the wider, thicker cable that has the 3 prongs that go into the back of your microphone and in the back of your soundboard, your mixing board. And so she's made this decision to go to XLR. It's going to cost her about almost $200. And we think about cars. Did you know that a manual transmission car always has better gas mileage than an automatic? It's going to save you in fuel if you go with a manual. What else will a manual car do? It'll actually give you more horsepower. So the horsepower in the automatics is usually about 10 to 20 horsepower lower than the horsepower that you get using a manual. And then you get the other added benefits of being able to gear down or make sure that you're in the right gear, or you could gear up, whatever you need to be able to save even more gas. But you got to know how to drive that thing. You got to have the coordination. You have to practice it. You have to understand it, or else you're totally screwed. If you go to XLR and you don't know how to use the mixing board at all, then it's not going to increase your quality. It's going to decrease your quality. Just like if you go to a 1 drum and you start to be able to play that just fine, you go directly to a full drum set. And if you don't know how to use that drum set, it's going to sound worse than just 1 drum. And that's just how it is. So I want you to be thinking, should you go XLR or USB? Be thinking, how much money do I want to spend? How easy do I want it? Do I want the extra costs of this? Do I want the extra control of that? And if you're like me, you're going to go XLR all day. You're going to use a soundboard or mixing board, a Rodecaster or a Scarlett, or the other ones that are on our website, growyourshow.com/PDF. If you're like me, you're probably going to want to go XLR. You're probably going to want to control it, know that it's set, and so that the gain isn't doing funky things. When you have it automatic, it can end up sounding bad. With that said, the next episode that is queued up already and ready for you is going to be some value as well. So don't go anywhere. I'll see you in 1 sec. If you're glad that you checked out the podcast today, if you got some value out of this episode, some actionable takeaways, I invite you to do one of 3 things. A, you could do a written review on Apple. Let us know what you think. Just an honest written review. B, you could share the podcast with a friend of yours who needs it. Or C, at the very least, implement what you've learned to take your business and your podcast to the next level. And I'll see you on the next episode.